What happens at the death of a living being when the principle of life can no longer be perceived in the biological matrix? What is the fate of our bacteria, our plants and our pets? We're going to get to the bottom of this question in this video. Hello and welcome to 6 Dimensions in Color. My name is Schmid, and on this channel I present to you the worldview of Burkhard Heim in understandable language and with clear examples. Maxims direct the development of all things from the dimension x6, from the subatomic till living beings. In the previous video I explained to you the difference between the two types of maxims. Extra maxims govern life processes which are closely linked to the genetic pattern and the cellular cycles, and they steer those entities whose individuality is not always clear-cut. On the other hand, this type of life can, in principle, continue indefinitely. This refers to bacteria, algae, primitive fungi, or primitive plants. The ionic area of those entities is therefore disvariant. Inframaxims, on the other hand, they enable the integration of two separate entities into a whole. That's what happens at sexual reproduction. And the area they span is at least partially televariant. Let us now turn to the other end of the puzzle. What happens at the death of an entity? A single cell is destroyed, a plant is eaten, a beloved pet dies. We can observe that the body is left to decay in the realm of the physical and left totally to the extra maxims, to the negative maxims, that is, of the totalities 6 or pseudo 7, the entropy maximizing totalities. But the all-important question is, what happens to the ill core? That what constituted the character and the nature of the living being, its soul, if you want. The ill core is a structure that receives sensory inputs from the body, processes them, and directs reaction back into the body. This happens, in Burkhard Heim's model, with activity streams. Activity streams always qualify for something that is gaining consciousness, and it's depicted with the so-called telecentrism. Now what happens when the body dies? That means these telecentrism ultimately detach from the physical matrix, and no more activity streams are flowing between the body and the ill core. There are no more activity streams and no more supply of physical stimuli, and no more possibility to express reactions. And that in turn means that the ill core ceases all internal activity. It becomes a static structure. And what happens now depends entirely on the type of the maxim. If an extra maxim was acting, then, as it is closely bound to the biological matrix, it will dissolve with the dissolving of the body. And thus we can now decide the corresponding area of bacteria and primitive organisms is definitely totally disvariant. It has no final telecenter. If, however, an inframaxim was acting, this is not bound to biology. Why? Because by definition, an inframaxim has the ability to integrate entities into a whole, and this is something that cannot arise from the pure biological function. It is evidently capable of this, and thus it must be something else. The ill core it induces can continue to exist in an X5 parallel realm. Although there are no more activity dynamics, the maxim, the ill core can no more be updated, and this is a static existence. There are no new possibilities for the future, no means to adapt, and that also means there can be no final telecenter. However, as we had concluded before, there is an initial telecenter, and therefore this area is partially televariant or partially disvariant. We can now conclude the less complex forms of life, those of consciousness levels 0 and 1, they dissolve at death, they have no post-mortem state, they have no afterlife. The higher levels, including mammals, maybe we have to exclude some higher primates here, they will continue in a kind of static cosmic memory. They continue existing as a lasting value. That implies nothing else, that it must be our duty to improve the quality of life of our fellow creatures, because this creates something true, real and lasting. How long-term this static state of existence can be is also subject to investigation. Basically, there can be two possibilities. First, this form of existence initially continues stably. It's still governed by an inframaxime. But after some time, this inframaxime may transist into an extramaxime, and therefore the ilkor will dissolve. This might be something that is species-specific, or it might be caused by an external event in the transcendent realm. And second, this static ilkor and the inframaxime exists forever and is only telecentered in the eschatological telecenter of the universe. Yet consider this. Suppose we have now a number of these cosmic memories, these eternalized cosmic memories of deceased plants, single-cell organisms or whatever. Due to the nature of their species, all these memories will have a certain similarity, which has of the accumulated experiences. But similarity in the transdomain means proximity. As a multitude of these, let's call it lifelines, is close to each other, they form a new area. This area is not televariant, but above this area, above in a metaphorical way, a so-called field of transcendence may arise. Burkhard Heim defines this term in his script Centrometric Maxim telecentrism in detail. Please do not confuse field of transcendence with transdomain. The latter is about the trans dimensions of the world, x5 and x6. The first is a centrometric concept, which has nothing to do with dimensionality in the first place. But this field of transcendence now implies activity streams between the different lifelines. But activity streams in turn imply consciousness, and the nature of this consciousness will be something like a species consciousness with a species memory. In human existence, or for our human terms, this may be something like C.G. Jung's collective unconscious. Within this species consciousness, now a certain dynamism can arise, which is likely to be all the greater the diversity of life experiences of the previously incarnated maxims was. Especially when there are changing environmental conditions, this activity will increase. And such dynamism may in turn affect the structure of incarnating maxims. And that will in turn increase the likelihood of advantageous mutations, which will enable survival under those changing conditions, or may even lead to evolutionary leaps in the long term. So just in passing by, we have now solved the puzzle of the evolutionary leaps that have frequently occurred in Earth history, which should not be possible by the pure statistics of genetic mutations, and over which the dogmatists of both camps, both Darwinists and creationists, regularly argue. Of course, Heim theory is neither creationist nor does it refute Darwin. Charles Darwin mainly observed and defended the observations he had made against the dogmatism of the Church. He did say nothing about the mechanisms involved. That was far beyond the knowledge of his time. The mechanistic viewpoint only became prevalent much later and is today promoted by dogmatists like Dawkins. So evolution does occur, but it is not a mechanistic bottom-up process, which purely arises from material things. There are feedback effects from biological life into the transdomain and back into biology. Of course, now I have told you in essence nothing new, at least nothing that wasn't known to ancient teachings or hasn't been stated by contemporary psychics. But do you only want to read or watch about it, or do you want to see it for yourself? It is quite easy to access these superordinate realms of information and of intuitive knowledge. And with the NATHAL method, you can do this in a quick, easy, safe, and unprecedentedly effective way. Go to my website, nathaltraining.ae, and visit my Instagram channel. Of course, we can look further now. Between these species consciousnesses, there can be transcendent interactions, like adaptation between predator and prey, or mimicries. And the species consciousness entities, they can actually be televariant themselves. These, then, are the post-mortem possibilities that exist for our bacteria, our plants, and our animals. The question remains, what is the fate of human consciousness after this discontinuity we call death? Before we can answer this question, we have yet to delve a little deeper into Burkhard Heim's six-dimensional concept of the psyche as he viewed it. So you can look forward to a few more episodes in this playlist in 6 dimensions and in color.